Hello.
Hey.
So, we heard a lot about non-linear career paths and kind of unconventional career paths as well, and that's sort of what we want to touch on today. If you were to take your design skills and pair them up with really strong business acumen, do things and be really curious, you could be a founder like Rachel. And we want to talk a little bit about that, what that looks like, that process. And I guess a bit more about myself as well. So as Lola said, I spent 9 years at Shopify for doing this. I definitely had the non-linear path myself. I went to business school for marketing. I taught myself graphic design. And then I started to work for Daniel Winan, who's a co-founder of Shopify, as a culture/design intern, which literally that was it. There was no job description, and I was fresh out of school, so lots of ambiguity. And it was kind of perfect because I was super curious to try to understand what culture meant and just took up different things and tried to understand the business. And we talked a lot about output yesterday. It's like, what were the business goals of Shopify and how can culture help that? It wasn't really about the happiness of the employees, but do they have the context that they need? So I spent 6 years doing that, really focusing on kind of the surface level culture, things that you might see, but then also the beliefs, the behaviors, what are people doing when their leadership's not in the room. After I felt like, okay, I've really gone really deep on this and understand this quite well, I want to do something completely different, and I want to be closer to the product side. So I switched over to be chief of staff to our chief product officer. Spent 2 years doing that and just wanted to learn everything I could about the product roadmap, product operations. With such a big, complex product, it's actually quite a bit to take in. And then my curiosity then led me to move over to the marketing department. So that was kind of like my last thing that I did at Shopify, where we had over 1 million merchants, and every time we would launch a product or tell a story, we wanted to accompany it with one of the merchants and sort of show what the impact was on them. But it was very hard to find a merchant to pair. It was like, okay, I'm looking for a female-founded business in Brazil in the skincare industry. That shouldn't be so hard, but it wasn't that easy to do. So I built a tool internally. I taught myself MySQL, which was, just asking people, being very annoying, asking lots and lots of questions and Googling lots of things, and built this tool that I think is still in use today. But throughout this 9 years of my time at Shopify, what was also happening behind the scenes was there was lots of ups and downs. The company was changing quite a bit. I had to really keep up with my growth and development. And so I had found a group of women at Shopify that I really relied on for support. And so we spent almost a decade together. There are 10 of us that have started Backbone. And collectively, we literally scaled customer support, legal, marketing, design, data. It was the whole gambit. And we kept thinking, wow, we are so lucky to have each other. What would it feel like? What would it be like if we could support others that don't have this kind of support or network? So we'd been talking about it for a few years, and then we finally decided that we're going to launch Backbone Angels. It's a collective angel group, the 10 of us. And the way that it works is that we individually decide to put our money in and choose which companies we want to support. But when a company is funded by one of us, then they get access to all 10 of us. So even if all 10 of us didn't invest, you get the expertise of everybody involved. So Rachel, we've actually just only met, 2 days ago, but we've been working together for a few months now. Yes. And we came across this, we get lots of pitch decks and that sort of thing, but Wethos sent us a product demo that, before I even talked to her and Claire, I was like, this is amazing. So I'm really, really excited to be here with her and share her journey. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about, I know you went to art school, you were a creative director, and now you're CEO of a tech company. Tell us about you and Wethos.
Yeah, for sure. How did I get here? Because my parents are honestly still very confused about what's going on. So I originally went to school at Syracuse University for communications design. Communications design, I think, is something that more people should be doing and I guess offering. It kind of goes back to some of the conversation from yesterday about content and how important content is to the design itself. And so I kind of learned there how to communicate through a ton of different mediums, regardless of whether it was an exhibit or a magazine or a website. And we literally were building to scale models of exhibits so that we could learn how to make sure that the line of text on the wall is at eye height and all these things that you just wouldn't think about. And when I graduated from there, our program kind of goes directly on a track to advertising, essentially. Like, they ship you down to New York, and they're like, here, and your portfolios. And I got my first job as an art director, actually working on the CoverGirl account at the digital arm of Gray at the time. And it was funny, because back then, it was like 2013, digital media and social media was still very new. And so they were doing that thing where they were like, oh, you're young, like, you shoot CoverGirl's Instagram. And I was like, okay. So here I am on the roof of the Ogilvy building, like, with my own camera, shooting nail polish for their Instagram. And I just really learned a lot at that job, because I had a really amazing creative director who was a great mentor to me. And because social and digital was still so new, it was really scrappy. And I really liked the fact that I could, like, build a little mini Super Bowl stadium and then live tweet the Super Bowl. And so after that, about a year of that, I actually left and I went over to Havas, a different agency, and I started working on the Hershey's account, which is where I met my now co-founder, Claire. If you're looking for a co-founder, like, look at work. Do not, this is gonna maybe be controversial. I don't know about starting businesses with friends. It's just a whole different thing. And really what it is like, Claire and I worked together for 2 years before we started a company. So we already knew our working styles. We already knew how to communicate with each other. Granted, like, we're in now a 7-year-long relationship at work, but like, we have to continue to work at that communication. But I just wanted to throw that out there, because people always ask me, like, how do I find a co-founder? Where do I find a co-founder? They might be wherever you work right now. And so Claire and I worked on the Hershey's account, and it was interesting because Hershey's owns a lot of candy brands. They own Jolly Rancher, they own Kit Kat, they own a bunch of stuff. Yes, I had a lot of chocolate on my desk. And we worked across all those different accounts, and what we started to see happen is we were losing those accounts. We were losing them to, like, really small studios, like 3 dudes in a WeWork with their iPhones. Because at that point, Havas is a big agency, and really those big agencies are built for TV production, and TV production is a whole different beast. I actually did shoot a commercial once for KY, which is a story for another day. But TV productions are very different. They can take a year to develop a TV commercial or more. It takes 6 months to shoot it and do post-production and then actually go live. And you're color correcting a TV commercial on a 4K movie theater size screen. So it's really expensive. It's really expensive. And now suddenly this wave of digital media was coming in, and it was a different beast. Like, one TV commercial can run for years if you really want it to. Digital content has a much shorter shelf life. You can only run a video on Facebook for so long. You need a higher volume of content, but it also still needs to be fairly high quality. And at the same time all this is happening, all this new technology was emerging. Your iPhone suddenly could shoot just as well as, like, a handheld camera. And so all these things were changing, and our clients were asking us, our account people, like, why does it cost $10,000 to shoot one Facebook video? And I was asking us that too. I was running around in the production department being like, why is it so expensive? I shoot it in the kitchen. I can shoot in the kitchen. Like, I know what my salary is. I don't understand. And when I started to realize and kind of, like, see these different patterns and understand what was really going on, that's when I realized that, in my opinion, I think the legacy agency model is dying or dead. And that's when I was like, we gotta go. We gotta get out of here. And it's really what I did is, like, I actually sent my co-founder Claire a GChat, and I was like, hey, so I've been thinking, like, I've been looking for doing more meaningful work, and we ultimately decided basically to quit our jobs and start, like, a freelance studio, is what I would call it. And what we were doing is we were putting together basically, like, project-based teams for our clients. So we had this big network of freelancers that we worked with, and we were curating teams based on, like, who the clients were, and we were actually predominantly working with a lot of nonprofit organizations. They were really good for this model because they're already very understaffed, and so essentially what they needed was, like, they're like, we need a marketing person. It's like, no, you need a whole department based on what you're describing to me. And so we basically kind of subcontracted with other people, and then we would put these teams together. And that kept our overhead really low, and it enabled us to grow the business really, really quickly, which is where, like, that 1.4 million in revenue came from. Now, that's honestly when Claire and I found out, like, how hard it is to scale a service-based business. And a service-based business, meaning you're providing services to a client, In order to grow that, in order to take on more work, you literally need more people to deliver that service. And more people create financial complexities. Specifically, how much should we charge the client? Who is gonna get what? What is our profit margin? How are we gonna manage the payments coming in from clients and out to teammates? And so we had this sort of like Frankenstein internal product that we had built for ourselves that kind of like patched a bunch of tools together, and then we had a full stack developer who was building out more like an admin interface on top of it. And once we started to use that, we realized that it's honestly a lot like the Shopify story. We realized like just how powerful the tech actually was. And the story of Shopify, I don't know if people know, but Toby, I think, started as a snowboard store. He was selling snowboards online.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he found out how hard it was to build an e-commerce like store online.
Yeah, he's just like, every solution out there is
horrible,
awful.
Yeah,
and I can code something better.
Yeah, and so his snowboard store, from what I understand, was actually doing quite well. But he had the same sort of realization. The technology that they had built to facilitate all of that was more powerful. And so our platform at that time, and what it is today, really dealt with all the complexities from scoping out a really complex project like a website or a brand campaign, all the way through to managing money and then managing the payments to our teammates. So in 2020, the pandemic hits, and a lot of our friends got laid off from advertising. They lost, like WPP lost like 8% of their talent. I was like, here it comes. Like, this model is broken. And it's broken because when you're in a big agency and you lose one big client, there goes half your staff. Our model, though, didn't work that way because we were pricing on a project basis. And so it wasn't about relying on a retained relationship plus salaried fixed employees and expenses, right? Because those things are connected. The business model and the operational model is connected. It was about putting together big projects for project-based teams and then basically enabling freelancers to pitch bigger projects and take home bigger paychecks. Because it's better to split one $30,000 contract as 3 people than it is to do a couple logos for a couple $1,000s. So we ended up actually like releasing our software, and we raised a $3 million round actually right before the pandemic in 2019. Pandemic hits, and we essentially wound down our own sort of service-based business, and then we wound up the platform. We had to redesign the whole interface because it was very horrible. Like, we were just using it, and it just didn't make sense. And the whole idea was that we wanted to be able to give people the technology to self-organize into their own teams, make it a lot easier to price those complex projects without us being in the middle, which is where a lot of that complexity was.
I think what's so interesting about your story is that you were clearly working on the creative side, but then as you describe the story, you're like, okay, so you just understand business so well, like, and I don't think that that's common, unfortunately. So I'm curious, when did you pick up these, bits of information?
It's weird, like, I guess I never really considered myself a systems thinker, but I think that's how my brain is. And I learned a lot about relational databases because the way that we built the scoping tools, like, we don't use hourly rates. We actually have a giant database of services. And each of those services has a price tag and it has a description. And we wanted to find a way that would streamline the process so that when I put a scope of work together, I could also easily break down a budget of different roles. So each of those services also has roles attached to them that you can assign or reassign. And so, like, what I was trying to do, I guess, is like, I'm a problem solver at the end of the day. Like, I'm unwell, like, I'm obsessed with problems. And when I get into something and I'm like, I need to understand this, even if it's like a giant knot of craziness, I can't let it go. Like, I just have to. So I think that it was I think it's part in that, and then it's part just like being resourceful and not being intimidated. Like, not asking for permission. Like, I don't need someone's permission to build a technology platform. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need somebody to tell me, like, tech. Like, and I think people a lot are waiting for that. I think they're waiting for the permission to do something or to try something, and I've just never been that way, and I always been like, well, if not me, then who? And like, why not me? And so when I'm trying to solve a problem, I'll go to the ends of the earth to figure it out. And I think that's how all this sort of came to fruition, because ultimately the complexity wasn't just like, we need software. It was a business operations fundamental problem.
Well, exactly. And I think even when we talked about this earlier, you talked about how you focused in on charities when you were doing the service part of your business. And I was like, that's interesting. Why did you do that? And you're like, oh, I went and I read all the financial statements. And she's like, but I'm not a math person. And I was like, okay, tell me about how like those two things coexist.
I know, I also have ADHD, so just bear with me. My brain's a little everywhere. So
it's impressive, and I mean that like.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just like, it's one of those blessings and curses, honestly, that is part of that. Like when I started to talk to customers, which I do all the time, and when we were trying to figure out, like, look, starting a freelance business, starting an agency is competitive, especially in the for-profit space. It's funny, like I get cold emails from agencies all the time that want to work with Wethos instead of the platform, and it's like that Spider-Man meme where you're like both pointing at each other, and I'm like, but what are you guys using for your software? Because there's so much like cold emailing, and there's just a lot of competition in agencies who want to do sexy for-profit work. Like I want to be the agency that does the next like Casper campaign, like that was like a big thing. And so we were looking for a white space, is what it's called. Like we were looking for a way in. And we were like, how do we get this business off the ground in a way that also aligns with our values, and in a way that we feel like we can solve really meaningful problems for people. And that was really what it came down to too. And then that lined up with the market opportunity. And then from there, the question, whenever you work with a nonprofit, is like, is there money here? Let me tell you guys something. The nonprofit space contributed $1 trillion to the US GDP last year. It is huge, like huge. Goodwill, $300 billion nonprofit organization. Now the problem is that nonprofits are in a starvation cycle. They're not allowed to spend money on overhead, which is a rant for another day. But in reality, what was happening is there was a lot of funding flooding into the space. They're not really allowed, quote unquote, to hire full-time, particularly with like marketing, design, creative. It's hard to justify to your board. And what we figured out was like, the person, if they do have a communications person, desperately needed a team of freelancers, not just one. And if they didn't have a communications person, they definitely needed like a lead and then a team, because they just had so much going on. And so all those kind of things lined up, but it's not like I could see like into a crystal ball. It was kind of like pulling threads, and figuring out like, okay. And then when I found out that GuideStar, like nonprofits are required to publish all their financial information by the government, that's part of being a nonprofit. If you go on GuideStar, you can look at any nonprofit financial statement that you want. And I found this line item in there, because this was a big question, like, do they have money to spend? Do they have money to spend? Found a line item, professional services. And I asked somebody I knew that worked at an organization, I'm like, what is this? What does this mean? She's like, oh yeah, that's where we outsource, that's all our vendors. And I was like, boom, done. And then I've extrapolated from there. I'm like, well, let's see, this is $1 million nonprofit. I've looked at, 25 of these. On average, 10% of their budget's going to professional services. Okay, if the nonprofit space is $1 trillion, space, then we're looking at you do the math, is what I like to say from there. We're looking at really a lot of money, a big space. And so, yeah, like I think like it's hard looking back, like hindsight's 2020. It's easy to say like all these things came together, but in reality, it was like a lot of just strategizing and talking to people, and then figuring out like what was working, what wasn't, and then replicating the things that work.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, we sort of, gloss over this, it's really easy to look back and talk about the story. Like, it was, we had it all figured out. None of us do ever. But even, you talked about your co-founder, and Claire, and you have very different skill sets, right? And she understands almost the business operations side in a different way than you do. You talked about, I remember you saying that she was like working at a bar, and you guys were like, you would just go and sit at the bar with her and then talk about your business there while she was working the bar. So can you talk about like some of those kind of, the real nitty-gritty stuff that actually happens behind the scenes of being an entrepreneur? I
would love to. So I started this company in 2016, which was now, what year is it? 6 years ago. And the first 2 years we didn't pay ourselves anything. Like we were really like we were doing freelance like with our business, and really the ultimate goal was always to do something big and meaningful and at scale. And from there, like we had to supplement our income. Like Claire, when we quit advertising, I remember I saved up 6 months worth of rent, and I was like, all right, I need to figure out how to make money in 6 months. Ready, set, go. And for the first like year and a half, 2 years without any funding, like Claire and I were bootstrapping hard. Like Claire was working a bar below her apartment, and we would go from like 8 a.m. to 4, and we would work in her apartment on the business. Then she would go down to work at the bar downstairs, and then I would come down to the bar with my laptop and I would freelance. And honestly, by the time Claire quit that job, because we had secured funding, she was like balancing their books, I swear. She was like in the back of there, she was like, oh yeah, I've been helping them with some accounting stuff. And I'm like, Claire, we have other business to run. But in those moments, the thing that I think always keeps me going when like, who am I to do this? And like, just the two randos in a bar trying to make something happen, like who cares? I always go back to talking to whoever my customer is. And as long as I'm finding that there's a need or a pain point and that there's people out there where there's demand, then it doesn't, the validity of like being in TechCrunch or raising money or any of that other stuff, like none of that stuff really matters that much. It really is about like, do people want what you're trying to sell? And that fundamentally is the question that not enough people answer for themselves before they go off and build software.
Yeah, and you know, you've started, this is the other thing that I like really like about you and Claire is that you start from the place of like, what are we selling and do people want to buy it? But then at the same time, you have paired that with, do I want to make that? And do I, like, does this matter to me as an individual? And I've heard you talk quite a bit about, you know, the clients that you had when you were working in the service space and like how you were very aligned with them from a values perspective. And even now, it's very evident like how strongly you both feel about what you're doing and what it enables. Can you share a little bit about that side as well?
Yeah. So once we wound down the service part of our business, we wanted to up the product. We onboarded like our first 100 freelancers to the platform. And it was really like the database of scoping and pricing tools. So like we give people pricing recommendations based on how other people are charging. And we do that because when you look at the market data, 95% of freelancers are not breaking six figures right now. And that is specifically problematic because by 2030, half of the US workforce is projected to be freelance. And six figures does not mean what it used to mean. The cost of life has gone way up and wages have seriously stagnated. And so if we have 95% of half the workforce not breaking six figures, those are not viable and lucrative careers that you can raise your family on. And when I sit down and I talk to my customers about why'd you do this, why are you going independent, what's your ultimate vision, what's your ultimate goal, the thing I hear over and over and over again is family and freedom. Family and freedom, family and freedom, over and over again, no matter who I talk to. And that comes down to the fact that they want to be able to do what they love, but they need to be able to support their family on that. So we felt really strongly about this because when we were working with so many freelancers, we realized like how many clients are out there creating a race to the bottom. And that was really problematic. And so we now actually, this morning we crossed 42,000 businesses on the platform.
That's huge.
It's been crazy. Yeah. Yeah, in about a year and a half.
Congrats.
Yeah.
That's wild.
But yeah, and really the reason why we've grown so quickly is because of those pricing recommendations. Like we hear from people all the time, like, hey, you helped me double my income. I didn't know I could charge that much. Or I didn't realize I was undercharging so much. And that to me is really, really powerful. And so that's truly what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's like, I want to help more people make more money.
Love that mission. And so now you're essentially enabling a bunch of creatives to kind of do what you did. I'm curious to know if you have any like trends or stories that you can share from like customers or platform, like from your platform that have embodied what we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I always joke, I'm like, most agencies today are actually like 3 freelancers under a trench coat. A lot of dev shops also work that way. A lot of like small accounting firms, legal firms, like people don't talk about this because it's sort of like advertising's like dirty little secret, you know? Like they don't want you to know that like the chief creative officer who like pitched Coca-Cola to like win that business, like you'll never see him again. And so they're all pulling from the same pool of freelancers over and over and over again. And clients are interesting because we went through this with our business where we were like, do we hide the fact that we're subcontracting? Like, do we tell them? What we ended up doing ultimately is leaning in. So we actually made that our value prop. We were like, we will curate the perfect team for you. We went like the opposite direction to help set ourselves apart. And when talking to my customers, what really continues to, I guess it doesn't surprise me, but it continues to reinforce our original sort of hypothesis. The folks who are breaking six figures, this is what they're doing. Because as a one-person shop, you're limited. You're limited the amount of projects you can take on, and you're limited the types of projects you can take on. And so we have stories from our users, everything from like a small video studio in Albuquerque, New Mexico, who was 2 people, has now scaled to 6. So we love that. They have tripled their revenue, I believe, from using the platform. We have people who have gone from like a $10,000 project minimum to like 6-figure contracts people are landing with our scopes and our projects.
And that's because they just didn't know what to charge. And they didn't know who to partner
yeah,
with.
And I think what it is like, it goes beyond, because there's a lot of places where you'd be like, what is an hourly rate for a freelancer? And that's not the model that we subscribe to, because for a lot of reasons, but like putting a price tag on a human person is silly, in my opinion. Like, because depending on the project, depending on the client, depending on the situation, one fixed hourly rate doesn't have enough nuance. So like, just to tell somebody like, on average, freelancers are charging $60 an hour for brand design, okay. What do I do with that? So instead, what we have is like, it's not even just like, what's the price point, but it's like, what goes into that scope of work? What goes into the things that people weren't charging for? Like, oh, I'm not charging for the time I spent on calls with my clients. I'm not charging for the time spent to package and hand off the files. I'm not charging for extra rounds of feedback. What it really was is actually people realized how much free work they were giving away.
Right.
And didn't realize they were like, didn't know even that there was the ability to say like, no, like the upfront phase for this scope of work is gonna be discovery, and we are gonna bill you for doing kickoff calls, doing interviews with your team members, hosting those collaborative meetings to come, especially for brand stuff, like, and actually breaking all of that out. And people have subscribed historically to the advertising thing where you sort of keep all this shrouded in mystery. Like, you don't want to tell the client like where it's all going.
What's the breakdown?
Yeah, like, ooh, the magic. And like, I get this pushback too, or like, what about the magic? I'm like, no. We found that more transparency actually helped us close way more business. When they understood what went into
they're paying
it.
for, yeah.
Yeah, when they understood all the work that went into it, and we actually broke it down and didn't just say, here's $30,000 scope of work, sign on the dotted line. It set the stage for a much better, stronger collaboration, and it was a much faster yes, I guess, is what I experienced.
And that's also like a product design piece too, right? And so you've talked a lot about product design, the design strategy being the business strategy, like it's one and the same. How does that work for you in your brain? Like, how do you guys talk about that internally?
Yeah, this is tough, honestly. And like, so we're a small team still. I mean, we're less than 20. We're like, I think 16 or 17 full-time right now. But even with that size of a team, this idea of like design having a seat at the table is kind of a weird like concept that is hard to sort of nail down. Like, what does that actually mean? Because you also don't want to waste people's time by forcing them into all these strategic conversations that are a waste of time. And I think for us, ultimately, when people talk about product market fit, to me, I think that comes down to sort of like 3 main components. It's like, who is your customer? What is the experience that they're looking for, and are you able to provide that experience to them? And then, how much are they gonna pay for it? And I think that people forget that even things in the product, like where the gating happens, like where we push people to say like, oh no, you have to sign up for a free trial, or you have to convert to a subscription, or we pay for, you have to set up a bank account. Like, where that happens psychologically in the user journey, you cannot separate that from the business decisions, because who the customer is and how much they're willing to spend, and then how you actually get them to that value, to see that value fast, those things have to work together. Because if you only have 2 out of 3, one of those things is gonna ultimately take everything else down. So like, we could conceptually sell, ooh, a virtual studio, amazing. And we could say like, we know the right model, no subscription, because we don't want to do per seat, because we think that's going to limit growth. We're going to actually be like more like payment processing, fintech model, and because of the user behavior. Because I know my customers, and I know that as a freelancer, you're probably not going to log in every day and put a scope of work together. It's not like Shopify in that way. As in like, you're not necessarily selling smaller things every day. You might be selling a large contract quarterly or monthly.
Right.
So the subscription model ultimately, again, doesn't make sense. So like, that's what I mean when I say like, where the user sees the value in the product, how you monetize, and then what their behavior is. We have to think about those things. And I think we too easily jump right to like the way it's always been done, which is like just slap a subscription on it, call it a day. Didn't work for us.
Yeah, there's a fair value exchange. Like they're getting something and they're like, this is worthwhile to me and I'll pay you for it.
Yeah, like
At this
we
point.
make money when they start making money.
Yeah.
When they get their invoices paid, that's when we start making money. And we also have a feature where you can push the payment fee on your clients on the invoice so that your client pays it. But yeah,
Well,
like that was a big thing. It's like we wanted to make sure that there was a values alignment there.
Yeah. And speaking of money, we can't not talk about funding.
Oh yeah.
So how did you raise the funds? How'd you find us?
Oh my gosh. I stalked you guys down. I did.
This is a fascinating story to me because the first time I heard it, I was like, what?
So, okay, the first round of funding I raised was $1 million round, and it took me a year to do that. And it was very hard. There was a really steep learning curve, particularly around just like jargon, like how people talk
The
about
acronyms.
the acronyms. And like investors will ask you one question, but they're really trying to know something else. And you're kind of like, what's he really trying to say or ask? So anyway, it took a long time of falling on my face, frankly, screwing up, not closing deals, not getting a lead, having to call Claire, like, no, it didn't come through, or I don't know. And it was really, really tough. It was a grind. And then finally, like, with enough, I told you, I'm not well. So when I've decided to do something, like, I will do it. And eventually, someone said yes. And he led our round in 2018, I think that was. It was $1 million round. Never seen that much money in my life. Was definitely a deer in the headlights. Like, holy shit.
Well, because the friends and family round, like, I didn't grow up with friends and family.
That, yeah, no. My mom was like, is this a scam? I was like, no. Seriously, she was like, are you sure this is legit? I was like, yeah, it's like a well-known VC, like, I swear. Yeah, like, I don't come from that. I grew up in Syracuse, New York, in like a tiny little house with a bunch of crazy snow dogs running around. And so, yeah, I didn't have that, and the idea didn't even cross my mind because it was just so, like...
Sort to, like, ask your friends
Yeah,
and your family.
I remember someone asked me that one time, like, oh, what about friends and family? I'm like, what about what? Who? No. So, we were able to do that, and actually, that first investor I met I stalked him down, too. There's a pattern here.
Like physically, right? In person?
Yeah, because I come from advertising, so I had no network. I had no idea what the difference between like a VC or an angel investor was. Like, I had no idea what was going on. So I just started Googling. I was like, where are the investors in New York? Where are the startup events? And I started basically trying to navigate what was going on. And then I made a list of people that I thought would find what we were doing interesting. And then I found out where they're speaking on panels or what events they were going to. And then all I did was show up, 10 seconds, introduce myself. Hey, I'm Rachel. I'm doing this thing. I think you'd love it. Can I just grab your card? I'd love to follow up. I do not pitch them on the spot. That's not my real vibe. Like, and also there are people that swarm those people. Like, they're busy, And so I'm not trying to cut through that noise right there. I'm just trying to get the card. Never give people your card. Always get somebody else's card. Your card is going straight into the garbage can, I promise. I know that's harsh, but it's true. Like, if you want to contact somebody, like, try to get their card or their email, because it's much better if you're in control of that and you're able to, like, reach out to them. If you hand people your card and just pray, like, hope that will come out of the sky, like...
It's like in the laundry.
Yeah. Like, they likely will just kind of, like, forget about it because they've just talked to 10 other people after you. So I definitely learned all these lessons by, like, screwing up, honestly. But yeah, after that, I started to understand, like, okay, this is how this whole thing works. And then from there, the fundraising, I wouldn't say it got easier, but it got to be less of a mystery, and it helped me better set my own expectations.
And you practiced with Claire, like you said that you would go and like try different, and then she,
So I would get a bunch of questions. I always write down the questions that investors ask me so that I can find better answers to them. And I had this big spreadsheet of all the questions that investors had been asking me, and Claire and I would like do these sessions where she would like grill me, and then she would interrupt me, and then she would doubt what I was saying, and she'd be like, well, but where did you get that resource? And like just be brutal.
Which is like what happens.
Yeah. It's training. It's like a muscle. Like it is. Like you just get into that, used to it, and I just learned different ways to not get pulled into those like traps, But it just took a lot of practice. And that also, I think, is just my learning style. I tend to learn by failing.
Trying it.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think like after that, we did the $3 million round, and then the round I just closed, which is the round that y'all came into, was an $8 million round last summer. And okay, so I've always been obsessed with Shopify in like an unhealthy kind of way. And so I had read a bunch about like the history and how it came to be, and I had studied like the platform, and
It showed when we talked. I was like, she's like read the culture handbook I wrote.
yeah, I'm like, yeah. So, and so when I actually saw on Twitter that they had announced a fund, Backbone Angels, of all these Shopify people, and I was like, I need to talk to them. And so I went to my network, and I was like, who knows one of these people? One of you has to know one of these people. I DM'd Anna, I think, also on Twitter. I may have even cold emailed once or twice. And honestly, like, I still do that all the time. I cold email people all the time. Once I got in my foot in the door, like once I was like, all right, let's get a meeting on the calendar, because the round was basically full, because it was a big round, and we could talk about this, but yeah, like as an angel circle, you may make up anywhere from like a couple tens of thousands to like 100,000 or up, but most of the checks in that round were like $3 million like VC checks. So this was a strategic move. It wasn't like a something that I was like necessarily exactly like needing to fill the round with capital, which was more so for my earlier days. And so it was really nice to have the opportunity to say like, I'm gonna leave space for like whatever it is, 100K, to see how many Shopify angels I can get on the cap table. Because let me tell you, y'all have been so helpful. Like,
That's nice to hear.
Like, there's a $3 million check, that's super helpful. But you know what? Like, the operational knowledge and experience is invaluable. I mean, like, just having that time and experience and being able to say, like, here's things we're dealing with, like, have you dealt with this before? That was what I was looking for, and that is absolutely what I've gotten. And so that was like one of the best decisions I've ever made, to be honest.
Well, so from our side, it was like in Slack, Anna sends the group, like, here's the pitch deck and here's a product demo. And I think I was just floored by what you guys had built in such a short period of time with such a small team. I was like, how are you already thinking about payments? Like, you're already thinking about payments? You know how long it took? And so I was like, okay, we have to talk. And that's kind of, well, the way we talk about Backbone really is that we want to be smart money and not just money. And I mean, money's hard to get, so like, let's not downplay that, but we want to help people with our operational experience, and that's kind of the sweet spot that we look for.
Yeah, and it really has been, from like, even just like recruiting and like building out the network and just like a lot of different areas. But yeah, like, it's funny because there are a lot of startups out here raising a lot of money with no product. I don't know how people do that.
It's a strange thing because people tend to, give money to people that look like them, people that they've worked with, people that can, sell really well, and also, I guess, founders that have done it before. Yeah. There's this kind of big thing of like, you've done it before, so you could probably do it again. One thing that like we really pride ourselves on is I think over 70% of our 42 founders have never built a business before. Yeah. So we love that. Yeah. Because we know that we're giving chances to people that probably won't be able to get into these rooms and are not getting the checks that they need.
Yeah, and there's benefits, I think, too, to that, because had I known how hard this would be...
You wouldn't have done it, or?
Would I have done all the things that would I spend 7 years, like, getting to this point? Maybe. But I think actually, like, not really knowing helps sometimes.
Absolutely. Just being curious, right? Like, is there a better, I think that when you know things and you're using playbooks and processes like we talked about before, and you're just like replicating the same thing, you're not thinking critically about the problem that you're solving and like, what are the actual things that it needs? And honestly, some of my favorite investments have been people that have just questioned something that has existed for a very long time. Like, this company that we've invested in called SheFly. I don't typically do like direct-to-consumer products, but they basically have redesigned the zipper for female anatomy. So if you're hiking as a woman, and if you need to pee, you gotta like squat down and take off your pants, which is not fun. Sometimes you can't find a bush. And so they were just, they were in the outdoor space and they thought, this is silly. And so they created a zipper and patented it. And they have a huge wait list. And what's fascinating about this is that like, it's not just the outdoor space. People in defense, people that, like women that work on, or anyone that works on bridges that needs to pee, like they were spending so much time getting off the bridge to go pee and then come back, so they're losing 2 hours in their workday or something like that. Yeah. And so they were solving a problem that was much bigger, but what I love about that is like they just took something that we all accepted every single day for like, I don't know, hundreds of years, as like, that's just how zippers work. But they're like, no.
Wow, I love that.
They went to their dorm room and like literally designed the product in their dorm room, and I was like, love this.
That's, exactly. Like, you don't need to wait for permission to do something. And I think being a designer, being a creative problem solver was a big part of that.
Yeah. I would love to open it up to you guys. And I don't know if there's any other questions you want to ask me about Backbone Angels.
Well, I guess why don't we see if there's other ones, because I was going to...
Thank you so much. Can we give Rachel and Konval a huge round of applause, because I have tips. We're opening for questions from the audience and the live stream. But yeah, maybe Rachel, you go ahead and ask Konval the question you had in mind.
Yeah, well, so what do you look for when you're looking or vetting companies to decide to like make an investment? Like, what do you guys look for? And then like, how does your decision-making process work?
Yeah, so like I said, angel investing feels like a very personal decision. And so for a lot of us, it's the founder. We're betting on a human being. Where we are just seeing, is there potential there? And then for me, the other thing that I really care about is like founder market fit. So is this person the best suited to solve this problem? Maybe because they've experienced it before, maybe because they've been in the industry, but it doesn't mean that they've necessarily like built a company in that space, but what is it about them or their team makeup? And so with you, like, you had been doing the thing before, you knew what you were solving, and that just sort of like made it a no-brainer. It's like, okay, well, if there's anyone that's gonna solve this problem and has a good chance of solving it, it's someone that's faced the problem themselves.
Yeah, and I love that it is different. A lot of VCs like won't invest in non-technical founders.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Like, you have to be an engineer, and I'm like, just because you're an engineer doesn't suit you to solve the problem. But it does suit
Don't
you
tell an engineer
to do the means to get to the means of the end. But yeah, so I always really appreciated that about y'all.
So let's stay with you for a second then, Rachel, because I think as a creative who founded a company that's oriented towards creative, how do you like sit between being a CEO and then wanting to be like, okay, I'm not happy with the pixels here. Like, what is going on with this leading, and like getting too deep into the details when actually you have a different job now?
Yeah, no, so if you go on our site right now, there's 2 create buttons that are like right on top of each other, and it's the bane of my existence. I'm very ashamed of it. So it's hard. Like, luckily I've never been like a huge perfectionist, I guess, and so I think that I've learned over time that like if it solves the problem, ship it, and then see what people do, because what they say and what they do are totally different.
Yeah.
So the best way to find out is to get it in their hands, even though that's like painful. So I just learned to kind of like live with that pain a little. And ultimately, what's really awesome now is that I get to hire amazing people who know so much more than I do. Because frankly, I quit my job when I was 25.
Yeah.
Like, I only been in the workforce for like 3 years. So like now I get to hire people who really know what they're doing. And I've had to learn to sort of like let go of those things that really bother me, like being pixel perfect. And I've learned to hone my skills in identifying people who care deeply about those things instead.
So true. I think you just hit the nail on something that you learned late as a leader, is you are always trying to hire people who are better than you ever were when you were doing the thing, which is fascinating. Any questions on the floor that we can take? Okay, I have another one. Sticking with you for a second there, Rachel. So you have a platform that supports freelancers, and you talked a lot about the impact on the economy and the way big agencies work, and also the gaps in, where money has been spent by non-profits, for example, but the individuals are not getting it. How do you marry that with maybe the way we traditionally think about work, like benefits, healthcare, stability, long-term, growth and scaling?
Totally.
Like, what's your view on that from a CEO's perspective and what your product does?
Yeah.
Big question. Take a deep breath.
So, okay, I think what I'll say is that what I've heard from my customers, honestly, which is that I think a lot of people the last year or two have woken up to the idea that a full-time job doesn't necessarily mean it's more stable. And in fact, you are in less control of your destiny in that regard. And I won't go on a rant about the American healthcare system right now, but some other day I will. The fact that benefits are tied to where you work and companies, and they're not inherent safety net, is obviously bad.
Yeah.
And so what people do is they end up stuck in jobs they hate.
Okay.
Or they end up stuck at companies that they're miserable at, and it's because that they're dependent on those things from that company. And like, this is sort of like, we won't go down like the history of capitalism, but it ties into, a lot of how capitalism comes together. And so like what I see is what I hear, again, is family and freedom. That's what I'm hearing from American businesses all over the country. And I'll just say quickly, we have 42,000 users on our platform. 24% are Black-owned businesses. 35% make over 100K a year already who use our platform. Our largest cities for signups right now are Miami, Atlanta, Houston, Austin, a lot of the Southeast, a lot of the Southwest. And I heard stories across the board. Like I said, family and freedom kept coming back to that. So to me, I do think the future of work is about that.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not my words, what people are telling me is the future of work is family and freedom.
Yeah.
And to me, if I can empower just one more person to be able to do that, then that's amazing. And for us, Shopify, again, built a whole ecosystem around your merchants. We have partners who can help you enroll in healthcare. We have partners who will give you discounts to different memberships for things. We are definitely planning to build out a huge partner ecosystem that just makes all of this much easier and more accessible. And that's the idea, is that accessibility is what people are lacking right now.
I think as somebody who, and many designers probably have freelanced at some point in their careers, where have you been? It is hard.
Toiling away.
Because you just want to do the creative stuff, and then you have to go figure out how to do all these things. I need to get paid, client, can you pay me? And a bunch of other things. And I love hearing about all the stuff you're doing around bank accounts and invoicing and just the workflows. You're solving the real problem. So thank you for that. Konval, I'm going to switch to you for a second, and it's still open for other people to ask questions. With Backbone, so Rachel mentioned earlier on that part of the value and what the 9 of you did was you found each other in this giant company that was very well established, and you were we cover legal, design, creative, operations, and we can help companies. How does that actually work in practice when you're working with founders or managing your investments and so forth? I'll share the mic. Yeah.
Yes. So what's really interesting is that the companies that we've invested in are at different stages of their business.
Yeah.
So some are just figuring out products, some are in growth stage. Essentially, it's we're only a year in and trying to figure out what's the best system and process, but we also don't want to be too rigid and again apply the same thing to everybody. Yeah. And so there's different ways that we're kind of getting in touch with them. Rachel and Clara are really good where they'll just shoot us an email really casually, hey, we're trying to do this. We need your perspective. Can we hop on a call? Yeah. So some folks will just do that. Some of them will send quarterly updates in an email or monthly updates and have asks for their investors. So they're kind of just emailing all their investors. So we keep an eye out on that and just say, notice you need some help with branding. Arthi is amazing at that. Why don't we set you up on a call with her? And so it's very kind of ad hoc and as needed, because the other thing too that we recognize is these founders know their business space better than we do. We don't want to be micromanaging and hovering and getting all the details. We're here when they need us, and they have our contact information, and we will try to respond to them as quickly as possible, but they're in that space way more than we are. And so it's oftentimes, that's the thing that we can give them is perspective. We're just a little bit removed and maybe can help them see something that either we experienced or something that they're not able to see because they're too in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that is absolutely amazing. And you also do introductions, I feel and connect founders to people that they can hire and so forth.
Exactly, yeah. They're we're looking for someone that has this sort of background, and then we'll say, I know that you think you need this, but have you considered this? So we'll sort of help them refine their hiring strategy a little bit, but then do introductions for hiring, for other sort of advisors that they can partner with. But that's kind of the beauty of having worked together for so many years. It's you kind of have this camaraderie and this trust and respect. And that's honestly kind of my favorite part about working with the 9 other ladies is that there's just, the due diligence is fun. They're smart. They'll ask questions and I'm I hadn't thought to ask that, because your brain thinks differently than mine. Yeah. And so when we're having these conversations jointly with their founders, we're having a good time and we're learning a ton because everyone just brings completely different perspective.
Is 1Password one of your investments?
Yes.
1Password. Many of us probably use 1Password. And I think today they hired their first chief legal officer,
Erin
a woman, Erin Zipes, who is one of the people that you guys know. So the flywheel is connecting. Any questions? Yes. Yeah.
How do I help pitch my friends without knowing the details of their business?
Okay, so to repeat the question, how do you be a great ally if you have friends who are founders and you want to pitch them and connect them to investors and people who may want to support their business?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really good question, and I think the thing about angel investing is also that it's quite gated due to network, and it's really tough. And so if you have the connections and if you can make the introduction, that means the world to them. Like a Passover introduction is so much better than a cold outreach. Not to say that cold outreaches don't work, they definitely do. I use them all the time myself. So they're both efficient, but it does help when there's a person to connect you. Specifically for Backbone, we actually thought really hard about how to overcome this problem because we don't know everybody that we would like to support. So we have created like a public application submission process that we just went through. And anyone can submit, like they don't need to know any of us. No one needs to refer them. They go onto our website, they fill out a pretty short questionnaire, tell us about the problem that you're solving, what does your team look like, how much money are you looking for, and what are you gonna do with the money? Like it's really clear. You can attach a product demo, your deck or whatever it is, and then we'll get together, look at it as a group, and then get back to them. It's interest-based and kind of like portfolio-based, so if someone's interested, we'll set up a call with them, have the conversation, do our sort of due diligence, ask them the questions that we think we need answers to, and then it's quite straightforward. Like, if we think it's something that we should invest in, we'll basically ask for their term sheet, so they'll send us like, here's what it's looking like, and then we'll sign it and wire over the funds. But I think what's tricky, and I feel like someone said this like yesterday, is we just always try to tell people if it's a no. It's tough when people are just sort of like left hanging. So even if it's a no, that's okay. And sometimes it's tough to say no because it's like a great product and they're a great founder, but it's just like doesn't suit what we can support them with. So we're not the right angel for them.
The allyship, I'm pretty sure I've introduced 2 founders. One has been funded by Backbone, just like send the people to the people with the money.
The other thing I would say just as a founder is like, ask first like where they're at with things from a funding perspective. Because an introduction to an angel investor for a, whatever, $25,000 check is very different than an introduction to like a VC who might be writing $1 million check. And depending on how much they're even trying to raise, that matters. And so I think like one thing that always like was hard when people wanted to make introductions for me was they didn't first ask me like, what are you actually looking for right now? And then I can maybe point you in that direction. So I would definitely say that. And then the no thing for sure. The next best thing to a yes is a fast no, period.
Yeah. I have one, Boyuan, yes.
Can I just go into the no real quick? Because it's interesting what you were saying, Rachel, about like you fail on your face, you learn from the fails, and all that kind of stuff. So when you're providing a no through Backbone, do you provide any type of feedback to help founders understand how to, pitch better or what's missing?
So to repeat the question for Konval, when you say no, do you give feedback to the founders to help them understand what it is that you said no to and how they might maybe make it a yes next time?
Yeah, so sometimes we will just say like, we don't see enough traction yet, so come back to us when you have a product demo or something. So it's not a no forever, it's just like we need to see more information. Sometimes it's a no, and I think the hardest no's are where it's just like, this doesn't align with my interest. Because it's like, there's nothing to give you feedback on. You're doing a great thing, you're just not for us right now. And then I think the ones that we do product demos, pitch decks reviews with are the easiest to give feedback to because we've had like a 30-minute, 40-minute conversation and we've asked them quite a few questions. And so those ones we will definitely say like, here's what we picked up on, this is why we're not going to do it. So whenever we can, and based on the information that we have, we do try to give them feedback. I think a no is still always hard to hear, so we don't try to sugarcoat it, but I think having a no versus not having a no is just the big difference. Like, being left hanging is the worst.
I do like the design that you guys have because across the 9, it's not like you've pooled your money, it's that you are all individually investing in projects and portfolios that you value, but you share the expertise and you share the vehicle.
So it's 10 out, like I was gonna-
10 of you, sorry.
But there's 10 of us and we debated for so long, like what's the model that we wanna do? Should we all pitch in a certain amount and then like 1 or 2 people gets to decide? And then we were like, the reason we were wanting to do this is because we wanna learn a bunch from each other and we are like, we want to be involved, and so we want to have the decision-making power.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like ultimately our goal with Backbone Angels is really, we want to see more women on cap tables, and we want women-owned businesses to be successful so that they can further create wealth for themselves and their employees, and then like do more angel investing. Like it's a trickle down kind of domino effect that we're looking for. But we felt that it was just the easiest when a person had autonomy to choose yes or no and decide how much they want to go in on. And what's super cool is like there's companies that I was like, I don't think I'm ready to invest, but like I'm happy to support. And so I've been introduced to the founders, and I'm supporting them maybe on like their hires or whatever's happening on the culture side or the storytelling. Yeah. So I still feel like I'm having an impact, and collectively I want every single one of our portfolio companies to do well.
Yes, the village. Go back to the village. Thank you so much, Konval and Rachel. Please give them a round of applause. And yeah, that concludes our morning. So please go through, have lunch, folks at home, take a break, go eat something, fuel yourselves up, and we'll come back at 2 p.m. for the afternoon.